SABC, host broadcaster of the G20 South Africa 2025.
Welcome back. You're watching our coverage that continues of the G20 Leaders Summit. Part of what I've been saying in the last few months is that with the G20, you're looking at a global conversation, but that materializes at local levels in all of these countries and territories that make up the G20. Here's an example. Food security. It's been front and center of the agenda of the G20, particularly for the South African presidency, with the establishment of the G20 Food Security Task Force. And that has come through in the leaders' declaration, with the leaders saying that they reiterate their commitment to ensuring resilient and sustainable food systems and food security through open and non-discriminatory trade policies consistent with the WTO rules. Let's take it then from that global level to a more localized level. The basket, part of the food basket of South Africa comes from provinces such as the Free State, and that's where we find our Kamogelo Seekoei, who will put that issue under the spotlight. Kamogelo?
Well, indeed, like you say, Tula Sizwe, the Free State happens to be one of the provinces that have been described as the food basket of the country. And we did have a chat earlier on with one of the farmers, just talking to them about this declaration, particularly focusing on the issue of food security. And they did mention that climate change, arid soil, some of the challenges, things that they do not have control over. But one of the things that they actually mentioned as a point that they want the G20 countries to focus on is trade and how that impacts the price of food in the country, the price of export, and how food is distributed, among the people in the country. One of the other things is them saying that the G20 countries could focus on subsistence farming, because that is where people are able to secure food. You might have seen in the declaration that about 720 million people in around the world were not able to secure food, in the past year, and about 2.6 billion were not able to access a healthy diet. But I just want to bring into this conversation an economist, agricultural economist, Dr. Jack Armour, just to talk to us about, firstly, the trade policies, that are there currently. Are they favorable, especially to South African farmers? And do they support them, or how do they actually make sure that there is indeed a good trade and food security?
So I think the trade system is very important to have in place. So Free State Agriculture with Grain South Africa have a direct line through AgriSA's trade desk, through BUSA with government, and through those channels, trade is set in place. So trade tariffs and barriers are very important to protect our local industry, especially in the Free State where we grow some wheat. We want our wheat prices to be protected against dumping from foreign cheap wheat. And then exactly the same with chicken as well. Chicken is a big, there's a lot of dumping or a lot of excess production maybe in the wealthier countries where certain cuts aren't needed, and then they dump those products in South Africa. So the Poultry Association has got very good systems and trade barriers in place to prevent dumping over here. So the trade system is generally working quite well. Yes, tariffs that are put on, sudden high tariffs, it takes a long time to establish a trade relation with a different country and to set up all the processes that are needed, all the middlemen and the distributor on the other side. And when that is disrupted, to suddenly find a new market is quite difficult. But luckily, that doesn't have too much of an impact on local food security.
Talking about tariffs, just talk to us about how this international trade actually affects prices for the local community here in South Africa.
Okay. So luckily, South Africa, we produce more than we can use locally. And usually it's our good quality products that are exported. So we've got more than enough for local production. So local prices shouldn't be affected at all. But the export is so important for us to generate foreign income. We need to generate foreign income as a country to be able to pay our debts. We've got huge debts as a country, 70%, 80%, close to 80% of GDP is foreign debt that we've got to pay. We've got to pay it by producing something. And our high-value agricultural products, the best, is what's exported. Everything else is what's used locally. So luckily, well, not luckily, if there is an impact on trade of our high potential products, there's more than enough locally. That food can still be used locally. But the income that it's generating, that's the big crisis for South Africa, is that foreign income that then is related into jobs, related into investment and all that kind of stuff.
Do you think that South Africa has positioned itself, especially the agricultural sector? I saw how excited the minister was yesterday after the declaration was signed, especially because food security, is included there and quite extensively. But do you think that South Africa has positioned itself properly, to take advantage of the gains from this past year?
When you're speaking about this past year, you mean of the G20 summit and all those. I think South Africa has done a lot to position itself for the G20, getting foreign countries here, getting their ambassadors and their agricultural attaches here has been very important. And we've been to a couple of events where we've been informing people of what we've got to offer in South Africa. I think the most important message is that we are an investable destination. There's a lot of negative news out there, but agriculture's carrying on. We've had a record export year this year, despite all the tariffs and stuff. So South Africa is still definitely an investment destination. If we can continue our talks with government and we can get things in place, our infrastructure, investment in infrastructure, and there's a lot of advanced talks that are happening. We hope those talks implement into action on the ground. But our critical infrastructure, the ports have increased tremendously. The main road network is actually a very good network. Our N-roads, our Sunroll roads. But the last mile, and that's where the impact on the smallholder farmer, and most of our members are small-scale farmers as well, small-scale commercial farmers, is actually getting the product from the farm to the market, to the agri-processor. And those roads are critical. That infrastructure is critical. And then another impact of infrastructure that needs a lot of investment that's critical is localization, local value adding, local processing. At the moment, our sector is dominated by a couple of big players, and that's where food security possibly is impacted, where you don't have local processing capacity. It's great to produce a lot of maize, but if you're not making that maize into flour that the local population needs, then that local population is going to be food insecure. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Armour. That was quite interesting. As you've heard there, Thulasizwe, South Africa is still an investment destination, and there's been a lot that has been gained, especially in the agriculture sector in the past year as we were holding the presidency of the G20. With that, is back to you.
All right, Kamogelo, thank you for that. That's Kamogelo Seekoei out in Bloemfontein, having the conversation around food security and how it has played itself out and has come out on the other end of the G20 Leaders Summit. Lots of moving parts, even on that front as well. Recently, the new decisions around South African citrus exports into the United States, their exclusion from the application of the tariffs. An interesting development, as well as the amounts that have been exported by South Africa in as far as citrus fruits are concerned, also making for an interesting bit of conversation as we talk about that. In the next few minutes, we'll be in conversation with Brooks Spector, continuing to unpack some of the themes and details that have come through from the G20 Leaders Summit. There you see him fueling up and getting ready for that conversation.
SABC, host broadcaster of the G20 South Africa 2025.